starting with David Höth, now that I learned how it is said. He will present a talk named Children as Experts, Evaluating Video Games from a Pedagogical Point of View. He is today representing the Spieleratgeber NRW, which is a platform that offers information for parents, children, and professionals about video games. As I understood it from reading through their webpage and their articles, they try to engage those populations in the descriptions they give about the different video games. And I'm looking forward to hear your talk, David.
Yes.
Yours. The stage.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Katharina. Again, my name is David Höth. I'm with the FJMK North Rhine-Westphalia, which would roughly translate to Center of Youth Media and Youth Culture, North Rhine-Westphalia. And the FJMK houses many different projects, but today I will talk about the Spieleratgeber NRW and how we wish for children to feel and be acknowledged as experts through participating in games testing in the context of our evaluations, which we write from a pedagogical point of view. Hence the name of this presentation, Children as Experts. So in the following presentation, I just will talk you through what Spieleratgeber exactly is, how it came to be, how we test, how our group works, and if we have time at the end, I will shortly address the parallels and addition that we try to do additionally to the already existing USK here in Germany. So let's dive in. What is Spieleratgeber? Spieleratgeber roughly, not roughly, pretty exactly translates to games guide. And if I had to describe it in one sentence, it would be a non-profit information hub for parents and professionals. Especially, we try to address those parents and professionals that have no particular knowledge of games. And we are funded by the federal state of North Rhine-Westphalia, to be exact, the Ministry of Children, Family Affairs, Refugees, and Integration. So to talk about the games guide, the Spieleratgeber, I have to talk a little bit about the associated projects. Here in the middle, you see the booklet called Digital Games Pedagogical Critiques. It is a booklet that contains information about contemporary video games and digital trends. And as you might gather from the cover of the booklet, it turned 30 last year. So this booklet, it's curated and written with the help of groups made up of children, teens, and young adults. Those are, in the case of the booklet, I think because of funding, they are Cologne-based, which is not the case for our testing groups, but it is for the booklet. So this has been in place since 1991. And since then, has been published annually, containing 80 game reviews and some information on current digital trends. This left a huge gap between publications, which then fueled the idea to establish a means of providing easily accessible information on video games. And yeah, that's how the Spieleratgeber website came to be. Other related projects that you see here are the ESJW, the Esports Junior League, which started last year, which is an inclusive esports league for teens. The Control Block, a kind of youth writing staff, which will shortly come up later in my presentation, and Gaming ohne Grenzen, which my colleague Mara Schulze will talk about after my presentation. So apart from that one sentence, Spieleratgeber is a website reviewing games, providing information on games, and yeah, for those who don't know much about gaming. So our ambitions are that we aim to support a better understanding of gaming. We want to foster learning and social development. We want to network and connect organizations of youth care and media. Also, we want to mediate between parents and the USK, which I didn't talk about that. Which is the statutory age restriction organization here in Germany. Not completely like Peggy and such, but I will dive deeper if you are interested into that later. So, Spieleratgeber, established 2005, so 17 years ago. The website gets up-to-date content, regularly written reviews get published, and as we write since 2005, there is a substantial catalog of 1,800 game reviews to read and to get informations from. We have 30 groups of children and teens that participate in our video game testing ventures. Those are scattered all over North Rhine-Westphalia. In some cases, we also have temporary groups popping up all over Germany, but mostly here within our federal state. So what happens in those testing groups? Those groups, most of those groups are outsourced. That means we do have some groups where staff from our team, which is not that big of a team, as you might gather from me telling you it's a non-profit thing, but people from outside organizations, mostly youth centers or schools, they come to us with the wish, voicing the wish to set up a group, telling us about their kids, how they frequent their facilities, and what kind of knowledge the initiator has of video games and what they want to provide, and what they can provide for setting up a testing group. Most of them are social workers, as I said. Some are teachers, and oftentimes we can say from the contents of the email, like from the first email, we can easily tell if the group will actually form and if it will remain intact, which maybe already has some discussion potential about the knowledge and the need to foster media literacy and knowledge of gaming in the professional atmosphere, like with teachers, like we just heard in the auditorium. So these groups, they mostly meet up in those youth centers, schools, and libraries, and the participants are between 6 and 19 years old. Those groups are mostly open, except for when they were formed in a school where they might be attached to classes. But that means this openness means that the participants, they come and go as they please. They don't have to answer any questions. They just can come in and participate if they want to. They can come one time or they come every week. So the number varies too. They come together, they test games on various platforms, and they play and talk, and eventually record their findings with their chaperones or guides, whatever you might call them. So they choose games. Sometimes we bring those games with us so they can choose from them. Sometimes they ask us to play and test specific games, and we see what we can do to provide those. Then they sit down, play those games, and talk about that play. So if they get older, they might graduate into the control block, which I talked about earlier, to become one of our youth writers and independently write those game reviews, represent young gamers at big events like Gamescom and write about it there. But this control block is separate from Spieleratgeber and has its own publication platform. So in those groups, those kids get together, as you see here. They play those games. And what we want for them to happen, hopefully, is that they become experts and gain expertise. And we like to foster that expertise and hope to achieve that through abilities that we challenge within those testing groups. And those are partly the following. So in those groups, the groups obviously, I guess, help them to sharpen their social skills through teamwork. But also, and very importantly, they play very differently in those groups. As they are playing together, they choose to play together and they choose what to play together. They decide what to play and they need to talk about play. So they think in that way about play and ultimately play differently or think about playing differently. So they reflect upon that, which is an important part of gaining media literacy. And it is, as I said, also very different from playing at home. They don't just play parallelly to each other. They, even if they play a single player game, they do it together. And they form opinions and need to take into account the framework thought of us and by them to then verbalize into a statement in the end. In that they verbalize and reflect their own thoughts and consider the opinions of other children and teens in that group. Also, they hopefully gain a better understanding of technology when they deal with games like not running on a PC or testing a Minecraft mod or playing with different consoles, having trouble with launchers or controllers. Many children don't know actually how to control, how to connect a controller to anything, or account-based games, stuff like that. Learning that there are also physical software releases and not just downloads, stuff like that. So through their participation, they gain knowledge, self-efficacy, and then are actually being acknowledged in their social group from our experience as experts. And after those testing group have been meeting up, those reviews need obviously to be written, to be published on the website. So now I will tell you a little bit about this review and evaluation process, which are, if that wasn't clear, the main pillar of our website. We have over 1,800 reviews being written to this day. So for the last 17 years, on average, we tested 2 games every week, wrote the reviews, and published them. It's probably worth mentioning that not all of those tests and texts were produced by or even with our groups. Apart from the number of games that we take into account, each group is unique. And in many cases, if there are games to review and evaluate, we can play them in our groups. This could be due to age restrictions, because we don't just throw children out when we want to play a game rated for 16 years and someone comes in and is like 12 years old. So also, even though our participants are becoming experts, they can't quite evaluate the pedagogical aspects all by themselves. So the reviews themselves provide a short summary of the game's story and narrative contents. Readers are informed on play style, controls, possible impact on players, and critical aspects of the game. Each review closes with a pedagogical, motivated resume. In whole, the texts are the foundation for our recommended age of play. So they are written mostly by our staff. Sometimes the group guides actually write whole reviews. But after I tell you about the structure, we actually can take a look at one review, and I will go into that further then. So for this review, we base them on evaluations, which are structured around certain aspects of a game that we gathered in the last 17 years through experience and also plain and simply questions from parents and professionals that want to know specific things about games. So this information catalog just grew. And obviously, every game is different. So, for example, we take into account payment systems and options, hidden costs, loot boxes and such, difficulty, are there complex game mechanics, is it hard to follow the narrative, because it's very elaborated? Or do I need an excellent hand-eye coordination? Not every 5-year-old has the same possibilities to actually work a controller, for example. What are the technical requirements or even requirements? Is it easy to run? Do I need to install 5 different launchers and set up new accounts? What about the contents of the game? Are there characters to identify with? And what kind of characters are they actually? Is the game time consuming? How about social and moral values? And yada, yada, yada. In the end, we come to a conclusion, which is in the end of every review in form of a short resume and also a recommended play of age, or an estimation rather, which then is actually the age that we think and feel a player can understand and successfully control and navigate through that game. So let's take a look at a review. So this is just the information part. I think we will just have to look at it on our homepage. This is the homepage. We are currently in the midst of getting a redesign approved and funded, but feel free to look around. So this is a review. Here in the top, you see core informations about genre, what the USK might have to say about age restriction, 6 years in that case. What we say, in that case, also 6 years. This game would be appropriate. Platform information, and all the stuff I already talked about. Costs, problematic aspects, and such. Then we try to have a text which is not too long, which doesn't implement any specific gaming logic, so it is understandable for parents, even children, if applicable. And down here, this is how, in that case, the testing of one of our groups is implemented. There might be also quotes in the text, but right here we see a testing group from Bonn, which is near Cologne, at a school tested this game. They gave the game a rating of 4 out of 5, and they voice their opinion and they justify their rating in this text and tell us that they align with the restriction of 6 years, and why. Because they might think it's not that bad for younger kids, younger than them, they mean, because they are older than 6 years old. They tell us about how violence in this game works, that it's mostly funny. And yeah, even they learn to justify their opinions and take into account children that are not like them, maybe. So how do we choose our games? Shortly, I'll tell you about that. We choose our games independently. We receive review copies after asking for them. And sometimes we do buy games if we don't get any review copies. And also sometimes parents or social workers will write us directly via email mostly, and ask for a specific game review. So in our team, we often try to choose games that currently are hyped or were recently released. Sometimes we feel the need to review games because of a certain discourse, like in-game currency or loot boxes. So just to clear that up. And lastly, before you can ask some questions, I just want to talk about the USK and how we try to add to the USK, because this is in place, and it is an official age restriction seal, you might say. And we, as I said earlier, want to be an intermediary between parents and USK. So we supplement USK's age rating system by regarding other angles. What I mean by that is that the USK inspects games asking questions regarding only youth protection laws and criminal laws. While this clears games for retail, it often does leave room for educational or pedagogical questions about that game and its age rating. So we try to bridge that gap with our reviews and also accounting the children and teens as target group into that process. Also, if someone is able to comprehend and experience a game in a certain way, it's not simply defined by their age. So a core addition to the USK's rating are our reviews, because USK doesn't do that. And we have the freedom to do a few things that take parents and interested folk by the hand and shine a light on those aspects of a game that might make the difference for one 5-year-old to play, but not for the other. And that way, interested parents can get a feel if a game might be appropriate for that child. Regarding retail, shortly, it's also worth mentioning that with games market rapidly growing into the digital sales direction versus physical, there's one problem with the USK regarding testing of digital copies, because the testing for online publishing platforms is not the same as for physical copies. We do have a system called the iArc, maybe you've heard of it, which gives the opportunity for online shops, only those who want, to portray the age restriction sigils in their shops. But the process to get those sigils up on the page are quite differently from the testing processes, but the sigil nearly looks the same. So we try to be there and review also games that are simply not reviewed by the USK, and to provide critical information about a game's worth, maybe one might say pedagogically or educational. Examples might be something like economy simulations, which most of the time or oftentimes are rated for no play of age, so playable from 0, but to enjoy and to control a game like that, you in almost every case need to be older than that. So I think I'd like to cut here, so we have some time for questions. I thank you for listening. Please take a look at Spieleratgeber online, and yeah, now feel free to ask some questions.
Thank you, David. This was a really interesting presentation. I mean, amazing work evaluating games. Who wouldn't like that in that room, especially? I have some questions, but I will first have a look in the room. Is there someone that would like to place a question? You can raise your hand or just walk to the yellow spot where the traces lead to. I don't see someone right now. Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, perhaps I can start with my questions. So, as I understood it correctly, you don't need to look for children to recruit or students. Teachers come to you, right?
Yeah, it's mostly the case. We do get mails and questions from kids and teenagers that actively ask us how to become a playtester. Sometimes they ask if they can make money with it, but we then can either refer those kids to groups within their area, or can see, because we do a lot of networking, we can have a look if there are organizations nearby that might be interested in founding a group.
Okay, nice. Because I guess having talked already previously about the accessibility barrier of some games, and having you now talking about it, also about the digital games that are not easy to distribute, if not being able to buy? That would be my question. And I can go to my next one, since I don't see someone moving, but perhaps I have to go around a bit. No, I don't see any hands, but we still have some time, so I can bombardize you with questions. So you talked about a pedagogical review for It's One of the Games, not all those games, the thousands of games, but some of them. And I'm wondering, since many of them do not have learning objectives, because perhaps they are not educational games, when you talk about a pedagogical evaluation, you talk mainly about things related to development, right? Age-appropriate games, or when the game is a serious game, for example.
I'd say there's like two main main pillars to that. On the one side, there is the testing, the educational standpoint, and then on our part, the pedagogical standpoint, on how testing in the group might help and propel abilities of the game testing children in those groups. So this is part one. And part two is our desire to educate everyone that reads our reviews, to inform about the games that their children play, and to get a deeper understanding of why they play it, if those games might not be appropriate actually for their kids, or if in some cases their kid actually is very far in their development, and so they might be able to play a game for a 12-year-old, but they are 10, for example. That we also do have, I didn't tell you that, but we do have smaller increments of our recommendation. So the USK has 0, 6, 12, 16, and 18. And we do have the freedom to rate between those barriers. We can say this game is rated for a 6, but we would based on certain depictions, alcoholism or something like that, for a 10.
And in the case you find a game appropriate for enhancing, I don't know, the learning of, I will say mathematics, because it's the easiest to say, when a teacher contacts you, because also teachers are your audience, do you do such kind of recommendations? Do you have this kind of evaluation for the games you work with?
Yes, we do. We do also test learning games. They are not that, how might I say, the groups don't fly off the shelves in the groups. Let's say that. But we do review those. And we also have another part on our website specifically aimed to educators, where we do write articles and do recommend learning games, or games that are not maybe not directly a learning game, but do serve specific purposes. If maybe used ad absurdum, like in Minecraft, playing social role playing or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Great. I'm looking forward to future discussions within the network that is now developing. Thank you very much, David.